Good morning. I'm Jeff Davis, Executive Director of the MSU Alumni Association. It's my pleasure to welcome all of our viewing audience to Bulldog Bites, our virtual speaker series featuring MSU faculty, staff, researchers, and alumni. Today's installment of Bulldog Bites is Your Healthy Roadmap for 2021, Goal Setting and Nutrition Strategies. Our featured speaker, Taylor VanDyk, is a registered dietitian and health and wellness educator. She earned a master's degree in health education and promotion from MSU in 2019. She also holds a bachelor's degree in dietetics and clinical nutrition science from Central Michigan University. She works for the Department of Health Promotion and Wellness at MSU and teaches a flexible approach to nutrition and believes that all foods have a place in the diet, even Mississippi State ice cream. Our moderator, Anna Caroline Logan, is a graduate assistant for the Department of Health Promotion and Wellness. She is currently pursuing her master's degree in health promotion and earned a Bachelor of Science in Nutrition from Troy University. A reminder to our viewing audience, you can utilize the Q&A or chat features in Zoom. And for those that are watching via Facebook Live, you can submit your questions in the comments section. Good morning, Taylor. Good morning, Anna Caroline, and welcome both of you to Bulldog Bites.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having us. Is this a good time to share the screen? Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get right into the presentation because I have some great information that I want to share with you all. And I also understand that with the events of the last year that our attention spans have definitely changed and maybe are not as long. So I'm going to try to cover all this good info in about 20 minutes so we have a good time for questions if you have any. So like Jeff had mentioned, today we are talking about a healthy roadmap and goal setting and nutrition strategies for 2021. So when Orly and I actually planned this presentation, it was right at the beginning of the year. And so we kind of had goal setting and resolutions and things on the mind, which some of those may have shifted over the past couple months now that we are almost heading into March. But with that being said, I'm sure there are some things that you still may want to work on from a nutrition standpoint, and goal setting and things like that can always be very helpful. So we'll be talking about that today. All right, so before we go too much further, I want to put this in your head as a little mantra as we go through the rest of this presentation, and that is that imperfect action beats standing still. So when I'm talking to people, clients, or people who are wanting to change their nutrition, some of the biggest things that I often hear are, I'll wait until Monday, I'll wait until the new year, oh, it's not the right time because I don't have time to exercise, or I'm really busy at work. And when it comes to diet and health behaviors, that is one of, I guess, I would rather say that sorry, let me think about this for a second. Imperfect action beats standing still because perfectionism is just another form of procrastination. So if you are waiting for the perfect time to change your diet or to start your health behaviors, it probably is either never going to happen, or just let me tell you right now, there's never going to be a perfect time for it to happen. So I just wanted to put that right here at the beginning so that can kind of be a preface for the rest of this little talk here. So we're going to be talking about healthy goal setting. Like I said at the beginning, when we planned this, it was right around the new year. And so we kind of had resolutions and things like that on the mind. But generally, when we're talking about goal setting and healthy behaviors, we tend to set our goals the incorrect way, which kind of leaves you feeling like a failure. So there's two big types of goals that I want you to have in mind. The first one is outcome goals, and the second one is behavioral goals. So if you've ever heard of terms like goals and objectives, this kind of follows that pattern, but there is a big difference, and I want you to be able to see that. So on the left side of my screen here, you can see that we have outcome goals. So outcome goals are going to be things that are long-term overarching goals. So this would be, an example would be weight loss. You want to lose 10 pounds. And I use that example because I know a lot of people can resonate with that goal. Another outcome goal example would be to run a half marathon. And the reason these are outcome goals is because you can't just wake up one day and say, oh, I'm going to run a half marathon today, or today I'm going to lose 10 pounds. Like, that's a longer term goal that you need some strategies in order to help you get there. So that is where our behavioral goals come in. And behavioral goals are basically just small steps that you're going to take to get to that overarching goal. So I always say that you can't necessarily change an outcome, but you can change a behavior. So when it comes to health and nutrition, we always really want to focus on behaviors because those are actually things that are within our reach and within our control that we can do every single day in order to help us get to those bigger goals. And also, it's just going to help you feel more successful because an example of a behavior goal is going to be eating 2 servings of vegetables every single day. So that's something I can actually track and I can feel accomplished. So if I am tracking it over a week, I can see that 5 out of 7 days I had my 2 servings of vegetables. I feel good about that. I feel confident. I'm like, yes, I met my goal. But if I'm only working on weight loss and I'm thinking weight loss, I'm only based on that 10 pounds and I've only lost 1 pound and I'm really only focused on that number, I get pretty discouraged easily because that's going to take a while to reach that goal. Where when we can really focus on these small incremental changes, we feel good about it and we're more likely to keep going when we build up that self-confidence. So now that you know the difference, here's just a couple steps that you can get started with these goals, and then we'll get to the more nutrition stuff, which I know is why you're here. But step 1 is be realistic. I always tell people, start even smaller than you think you need to. So I'll talk to a lot of people who have not exercised in years, and they say, we talk about movement and we're like, okay, let's set an exercise goal. And they say, you know what, I think I'm going to start working out 5 days a week. Like, okay, are you really? So one thing, you're basically setting yourself up for failure by doing that, because if you have not worked out in years and all of a sudden the goal is to go to the gym every single day, 5 days a week for an hour, that's probably not going to happen, because after the first day, you're going to feel sore. You're not going to want to go back. The week gets busy. You maybe miss a day. And then the next day you're like, oh, well, I already missed a day, so I'm just not going to go. So that I hope you can hear how that maybe doesn't set you up for the most success. So instead, I always say, start even smaller than you think you should. So if the goal, again, is exercise, instead of saying the 5 days for 1 hour, start with just 2 days a week. So literally cutting that goal in half and then just going for a walk on your lunch break. So is that, the most exercise you could be getting? No, definitely not. But again, it's achievable and it's winnable. So you could do that for 2 weeks and say, hey, I met my exercise goal 2 weeks in a row. Maybe now we can start to increase it now that you have a little bit of self-efficacy and you're feeling good about the progress that you've already made. So keep that in mind. And then step 2 is to assess your confidence. So if you set a goal, again, let's stick with our going to the gym 5 days a week for an hour, and you ask yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most confident, 1 being the least confident, how confident am I that I can achieve that goal? If you tell yourself anything below an 80 to a 90% that you can achieve that goal, I recommend that you go back to step 1 and reassess that goal, because I always want you to be the most confident, because again, when it's achievable and you win at it, you feel good and you're going to keep going. So those are my 2 steps for goal setting. And like I said, we'll kind of get into the more nutrition stuff, but I think that this is a really good place to start, because when we set goals, we tend to go for those outcome goals, and that just doesn't set us up for success. So this is the first step, is making sure you're clear on what you actually want to achieve when it comes to your health and nutrition. All right, so now we're going to get into my top nutrition strategies for success. So we'll talk about Fad Diets. We're talking about how, like Jeff said in my introduction, I believe that all foods can fit into your diet, even ice cream, even donuts. And then we'll talk about nutrient density, because that is really how we focus on kind of an overall balanced diet. And then we'll talk about the fact that health is actually multidimensional. And I don't want to give too much away right now, but that's a very important thing we'll talk about. And then lastly, about consistency and self-compassion when it comes to your health and behavior goals. All right, so ditching the fad diets. So why is this so important? These right here in the middle, you can see, are some of the diets that I'm talking about. And this is a little bit of an unpopular opinion. So I might have some viewers out there saying, but keto worked for me, or but clean eating worked for me. And sure, a lot of people do tend to see some success when they try these types of diets, but they're typically not sustainable. So a lot of people will go on, a diet for 6 weeks and they'll feel good and they'll have some success, but then maybe it's keto, which means that you have to give up pretty much most carbohydrates in your diet, which are things like bread and pasta and rice, cake, cookies, ice cream, sugar, fruit even has carbohydrates. So if you're on a keto diet and you are on it for 6 weeks, giving up all carbohydrates, most people can only realistically sustain that for a certain period of time before they're at a birthday party and there's cake, or they just can't handle it anymore. And so they really want ice cream or they really want something and they give in. And then they all of a sudden switch and they go back to eating a regular diet, and people tend to gain their weight back just as quickly as they lost the weight. So that's one of the reasons, is that typically these types of diets are just not sustainable. They usually ask you to cut out super healthy components. So again, I'm using keto just because it's a very popular diet right now. Keto asks you to cut out most carbs. And so that would be like potatoes, a lot of fruits and vegetables, and then grains, which grains are super important because carbohydrates in your diet are one of your body's preferred fuel sources, especially if you're active in any way. So by cutting that out, you're really missing out on a lot of nutrients, vitamins and minerals, lots of fiber. That's really good for your gut health. So when we're going on some of these diets that ask you to cut out an entire food group, you might be missing out on some of those important nutrients that those types of foods provide. A couple other things about fad diets I just want to mention. You see on here things like Noom, and Noom's whole thing is like, Noom is not a diet. However, Noom still is kind of a one size fits all approach. And most, like I've talked to people on Noom who cut out their, they tell them to go on a 1,200 calorie diet, and they still aren't necessarily taking into account you as an individual. So they might not be looking at your dieting history or your hormones, your family history, which all can play a part in the type of diet that you really should be following. So that's kind of my next one on my list about my why, is that a lot of these diets are just a one size fits all approach. They're not taking into account you as a human or you as an individual. It's just like, here's a meal plan that we wrote, follow it. And that also doesn't always work for people because they don't take into account your lifestyle. Like a lot of diets don't allow you to go out to eat, or you can't, I'm trying to think, you can't eat, like I said, certain foods. And so they might impact your social life, or they might increase or make you have a poor relationship with food because you feel guilty around certain foods. I'm thinking about Weight Watchers. I have Weight Watchers on here because that one specifically, I talked to a lot of people that they're like, I liked Weight Watchers, I liked counting, but at the same time, Weight Watchers forced me to cut out foods that I traditionally thought were healthy. So for instance, nuts. Nuts are very nutrient dense. They have healthy fats, they have protein, they have fiber, they have vitamins and minerals. However, on a Weight Watchers scale, they're really high in points because they are higher in calories. So that can almost confuse you about nutrition because it's like, oh, these foods I thought were healthy, but then this diet tells me they're not healthy. So being on all of these different fad diets can really just mess with what actually is true about nutrition and get you even more confused than you were when you started. A couple just other points on the fad diet list. A lot of fad diets they might require pricey supplements. So they like this Octavia one is a newer one that's come out, and it's required that you have to have their meals and their shakes and things like that. So, and what I typically tell people is if it's requiring that you have all these fancy supplements that are costing you a lot of money, or if it seems too good to be true, then it probably is. All right, so kind of keep that in mind when it comes to fad diets. And then just a couple other points I want to make while we're here. Fad diets, like I said, tend to have people weight cycling. So they'll lose some weight and they'll gain weight, and they'll lose weight and they'll gain weight. And there actually is research to suggest that that is very dangerous for your body. And generally people that weight cycle like that go up and down. When we look at a graph of their body weight over time, it actually tends to gradually increase. So just because, you maybe have gone down, but then it goes up and then down and up, and then eventually you're at a higher weight than you ever even started out. And then, like I mentioned, these diets just tend to contribute to a poor relationship with food. It makes you feel like you can't have certain foods. It makes you feel guilty about eating certain foods. And that's just not healthy overall. So that's my first tip, is for you to ditch the fad diets and find something that fits you, fits your lifestyle, and includes all foods, which is what we'll be talking about today. So that brings me right to my next point, that all foods fit. And I know this is a little bit of a wordy slide, but these down here are all just examples of different foods. So a lot of times we think of food as black and white. This food is good and this food is bad. However, that is just simply not the case. And so I want you to think about foods more on a continuum. So we have foods that are more nutrient dense and we have foods that are less nutrient dense. Those more nutrient dense foods, they tend to provide a lot more benefits, a lot more bang for your buck, if you will. So these would be things like whole foods, fruits and vegetables, whole grains, lean protein sources, beans, legumes, nuts, making sure I guess water isn't really nutrient dense, but it is a very important part of a balanced diet. And then in the middle here, so these would not necessarily be all the way to the left or the right. These would be things like fruit juice, frozen and canned fruits and vegetables, things with like added sugar, sauces, those types of things. Processed meat and fattier meats, dairy products would fall in this category. And then if you go to your less nutrient dense foods, these are the more highly processed foods, fast food, baked goods, desserts, fried food, alcohol, those types of things. So I guess just a quick example while we're here, let's talk about deli meat, for example. Deli meat is kind of in the middle here. Is it the highest quality protein source that you could consume? No, probably not. However, is it better than having to go to McDonald's and get a hamburger? Yes, absolutely. So I hope you can see how I'm talking about nutrition really is relative. It's not necessarily that this is good and this is bad. So that kind of brings us to our little rule here that I have in the corner. I like to say the 80-20 rule, or like the 70-30-ish, depending on the time of year that you might be in. But generally, we want to make sure that about 70 to 80% of your diet is from this middle going forward. So focus on whole foods and lean protein sources and fiber and all these foods that are giving you a lot of bang for your buck, lots of nutrients compared to the calorie level, I guess you could say. But that also leaves about 20 to 30% of your diet for these less nutrient dense foods or the more convenient foods like fast foods. And I found that when you're able to include both of these types of foods in your diet, it really helps you to get out of that all or nothing mentality. So for instance, if you are someone that has fast food for lunch and you're like, well, my whole day is blown, I'm just going to eat like crap the rest of the day. And then when it comes to tomorrow, I'll start back over tomorrow, or I'll start back over Monday. So by allowing these types of foods in your diet, even if you have to go to fast food for lunch because it's a busy day or you're, have to bring the kids or something like that, you have that lunch and it's like, okay, that was my 20% or 30% for the day. And that still leaves my next meal. I can get back on track. I can have a really good whole foods balanced dinner, and my whole day is not shot just because I had one of these foods that's considered to be less nutrient dense. So that's what I found the most helpful with this approach, is that it's not like, oh, I'm constantly starting over, because these foods actually fit and you don't have to feel bad about having them. Watching my time here. All right. So this just gives a little bit more information on that nutrient dense word that I was talking about. The nutrient density here is just the definition. It refers to foods that have a lot of benefits compared to the number of calories they contain. So they typically contain things like vitamins, minerals, fiber, protein, healthy fats, complex carbohydrates, and or some combination of these. So I have some examples of the different options or the different things that I just kind of mentioned there. Complex carbohydrates, that's going to be things like whole grains and starchy vegetables like quinoa or couscous, whole grain cereal, that all those types of things would be complex carbohydrates because they provide sustained energy over time. Right here we have your lean protein sources. So lean protein sources are going to be things like turkey and fish and chicken, eggs, and then plant-based protein sources as well, things like beans and nuts and legumes, like soy products, so edamame, those types of things would all be considered lean protein sources, and can provide, again, a lot of bang for your buck. So for instance, your salmon has some really good omega-3 fatty acids, which is a healthy form of fat, but also provides you a lot of lean protein, which protein is important because it helps to build and repair. And your entire body is made of protein. So your hair, your skin, your nails, your cells, all made of protein. So it's really important that we include those high quality protein sources that your body can utilize to build and repair. And then we have healthy fats. So healthy fats are incredibly important. One, they help you to stay full and satisfied. Healthy fats are important for like things like hormone production, and they include some of those healthy fatty acids, like I was mentioning, which is important for brain development, especially in like younger children. So it's important to include those for, kids in a younger population as well. Healthy fats can also really help with increasing your HDL cholesterol, which is a good form of cholesterol. We want that cholesterol. So healthy fats can help to increase that, which in turn will help to decrease your LDL or bad cholesterol. So lots of really great benefits for healthy fats. And then lastly over here, it's not technically a macronutrient, but fiber. So fiber is incredibly important. Again, I already mentioned this, but fiber is really good for your gut health. It technically is a form of carbohydrate, but it is indigestible. So it kind of helps with your digestion, keeps things moving on through, and most importantly, it really helps to keep you full. And I really like fiber because when you focus on fiber, it actually, since fiber is found in things like complex carbohydrates and fruits and vegetables, when you focus on fiber, you can automatically assume that you're eating more whole foods or more like nutrient-dense foods because that fiber is found in nutrient-dense foods. So by focusing on that one thing, that can really help you to assume that you're probably eating closer to that right end of the continuum that we discussed. All right. So this slide here, I can't lie, my perfectionist brain really dislikes it, but I put that quote in here that imperfect action beats standing still. So I told myself I couldn't fix it. But this is important because we are taught health is a certain thing, right? So growing up and probably from doctors and health professionals, you've always been taught that health has to do with your weight, your BMI, and your body size. And then maybe a little bit of exercise over here, or movement, or eating a healthy diet, but it's really not emphasized that much. But in reality, health is actually so many other things. So health has to do with your work-life balance and your relationships and your energy and your sleep, and making sure you have really good stress management techniques, and making sure you're taking care of your mental health, especially in a year like the one we've been experiencing. Diet and exercise, of course, is a portion of it, but it's not the whole pie, as you can see, like we've probably been taught. And then genetics play a role in our health as well. So those might be things that you can't necessarily fix because they're literally in your genes. And then there's more, like things like your things like your relationship with food has a big component. And like financial health, like all of those things play into overall health. And so when you are focused on changing your health and changing your behaviors, I really encourage you to think past your weight and your body size. And like I said, technically weight and body size, those are things that are outcome goals. You can't necessarily wake up one day and say, I'm going to change my weight today. You really have to focus on these other things over here, which are the behavior side of things, making sure you're getting enough sleep, making sure that you have some really good techniques for managing your stress, making sure that you are including all those nutrient-dense foods that we discussed, making sure you're getting intentional movement in your week, maybe getting some help for your mental health or for your nutrition. So those would all be things that are within your control and within your reach that don't have anything to do with your weight or your body size. So really keeping that in mind when you're setting your goals and making changes is they don't always have to do with your weight or your body size. And there are so many other things that you could be working on that might provide even more benefit than working on weight. So that's my little spiel about multidimensional health. And then lastly, here is the secret sauce, and then we will head into questions. It's already been about 20 minutes. But to top this all off, what do you need to be successful with this all foods fit approach and getting rid of the all or nothing mentality and focusing on nutrient dense foods? We need consistency. And I know that this one is really hard and typically the hardest for most people. But I always tell people anyone can do this for a week, right? But what matters is, can you do something long term? Which again goes back to those fad diets that we discussed. And like I said, most people can do that for a week or they can do it for a month, but it's just not sustainable to do for the rest of your life. So that's why you need to find an approach that works for you, that incorporates all the foods that you love, including the ice cream, including the donuts, including that glass of wine, so that it really is something that you can maintain forever. So with consistency, that really comes from ridding yourself of that all or nothing mentality. So it's not that my diet is perfect or I'm off the wagon. It's that I have 70 to 80% of foods are good and nutrient dense. And then the other part of my diet is going to be for fun foods so that I can enjoy my life a little bit. And then along with consistency comes going slow. So one of the biggest inhibitors to achieving goals, whether it's weight loss or whether it's just health behaviors in general, is that we live in a time where instant gratification is what we want. So if we're not seeing the results overnight, if we're not seeing results in a week, we tend to give up. So I really encourage you to be in it for the long haul and know that this probably won't change overnight and you're not going to lose 10 pounds overnight, and you are going to have to put in the work and you might need some support, you might need some accountability, but being consistent over time really is going to be what makes a difference. Just a quick example here. For instance, I talk to a lot of people that say, oh, well, what about on the weekend when I, go out to eat or hang out with friends or something like that? And not that that doesn't matter, because it does, but if we only focus on those times, then that's maybe, 30 to 40, 30% of your life. Whereas the rest of the time, that could be that 70 to 8% that you're really focusing on getting a really good, well-balanced diet. So even if you have an off weekend, even if you go on vacation, sure, enjoy yourself, have fun. But then when you come back on Monday or when you come back the next, when you start over the next day, really making sure you're getting back to that good consistency. And then lastly here, making sure you have self-compassion. I always tell people you cannot hate your body into something that you want it to be. So you need to appreciate your here and now body and learn to take care of it how it is. And when I say be an ally, I mean, think about an ally that you have or a friend that you have. When you have a friend or an ally, you're going to do everything in your power to help this person, because that means that they'll probably help you in return, right? And it's the same thing with your body. If you want your body to change in some way or help you in some way, it's so important that you take care of your body with nourishment and activity. And again, all of those other things that were in the pie chart, getting good work-life balance and sleep and stress management, and all of those things are equally as important. So I just, like I said, I want to encourage you that nourishment is a form of self-care. So a lot of times we think dieting is self-care because it's helping you lose the weight. But in reality, nourishing your body using nutrient-dense foods is what self-care is. And then being non-judgmental. So this one, I always like to ask you, think about yourself and if you've ever struggled with food or dieting or something like that in the past. How would you talk to yourself? And then ask yourself that same question, maybe a partner or a friend, what if they were struggling with their diet or their food? And how would you respond to them, or what would you say to them? And look at the differences in those statements, because I bet that you are a much harsher critic to yourself and have a lot more guilt, and you're a little bit more judgmental to yourself. So I would really encourage you to start talking to yourself and your body the way that you would talk to a friend or a partner or somebody else who might have struggled with these things in the past. So really having that self-compassion and being an ally with your body is one of the best tips that I can give you throughout this journey of changing your health behaviors and your nutrition. So that concludes this presentation. And so those are some of my top tips that I often give to my clients. I have here Facebook and Instagram. So MSU HPW, that one is the department that I work for, the Department of Health Promotion and Wellness. So I did plug them. And then also put my personal Facebook and Instagram just because I post a lot of nutrition and health tips and stuff on there. So if you want to get in touch, here is where you can find me. But I do think that we have a few minutes. If anyone has questions, I think Anna Caroline is going to go ahead and ask them.
Okay, there are a few questions. The first one is, are potatoes considered complex carbohydrates?
Yes, yep, potatoes are considered to be complex carbohydrates. They have fiber and vitamins and minerals and things like that. So yeah, potatoes are a good source of carbs.
Another question was, how do you feel about supplements in addition to a healthy, balanced diet for quicker weight loss?
Since since I don't know exactly the supplement that you're talking about, it's hard to say, but I do think supplements can be a part of a healthy, balanced diet. I don't necessarily think that people need supplements. Like I typically don't tell people like, oh, the only way that you can reach your goals is through supplements. But with that being said, like if you are looking for extra protein in your diet or extra vitamins for, like taking a multivitamin or something like that, then yes, they can absolutely be part of a healthy diet.
And another question is, what about chocolate in your diet?
Yes, chocolate can absolutely be part of your diet. That would be considered one of those, 20 to 30% foods are a fun food on the left side of that continuum, but absolutely it can be part of a healthy diet.
Also, what would you recommend people have a personal dietary consult? And if so, does MSU Health Center offer appointments with you or other dietitians?
Yes. So if you have never had like a nutrition consultation or something like that before, I think I personally think it could be helpful for everyone. But here at the Student Health Center, we do mainly focus on students, but we do, if you wanted to make an appointment through the Student Health Center, you could, and yes, that would be with me.
What are your thoughts on intermittent fasting?
Oh, this is tough. It's one of those things, there is actually some research that behind it that it has helped, but in my opinion, it still is one of those things that might be a shorter term fix, because again, it might be one of those things that you can stick with for a while, but then maybe when you're on vacation or you're staying at someone else's house or you're in a situation where you can't really control it, then you kind of get off the wagon, you would say. And so it might not be sustainable. I generally do tell, I know I talk to some clients who their body kind of naturally follows a little bit of an intermittent fasting type thing, because maybe they don't like breakfast or they don't feel hungry at breakfast. So they naturally don't eat until 11 or 12, and then they stop eating by 8 or 9. So that would be their window, I guess you could say. And so those people, I was like, you kind of already follow that pattern. So if that works for you, that works. But when it comes to that, I guess, again, it's not necessarily an one size fits all approach, but if it works for you, then sure, that could be helpful.
I think that wraps up all of their questions.
All right. Well, thank you so much for all of you who stuck around. I enjoyed talking. If you have any questions, please contact me.
And Taylor and Anna Caroline, thanks again for joining us this morning on Bulldog Bites. And to all those that view today, we'll also make the recording available on our website, as well as links to the deck of slides. So, but thank you both for your time this morning, and we look forward to seeing everybody next time on Bulldog Bites. Hail State.